Marisa Anderson is a gifted musician who hails from Sonoma, California, but currently calls Portland, Oregon, home. Though somewhat under the radar, Anderson is renowned as one of the finest guitarists in the world. Emerging as a lively interpreter of Delta blues and Appalachian folk music, Anderson has also been embraced by free and improvised music aficionados for the history of guitar styles and folklore, which she is obviously steeped in. Her latest album is called Cloud Cover and was released via Thrill Jockey Records on June 15, 2018, which has prompted Anderson to tour the world. After her recent stop at the Transact venue in Toronto as part of the relaunched Invocation concert series, Marisa and I had a short, late-night conversation reflecting upon her last appearance on episode 296 of this show, shortly after the 2016 U.S. presidential election, her new record Cloud Cover, her perspective on the current state of the United States of America, and much more. With in-kind support from Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, and Planet of Sound locations in Ottawa and Toronto, and of course, listeners like you who subscribe to this podcast, download episodes, and make flexible monthly pledges at patreon.com/creativecontrol. This is the 405th episode of Creative Control, featuring Marisa Anderson with your host, me, Vish Khanna. Hi, Marisa. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm good.
You're freshly off the stage here at the Transact in Toronto. We're in the green room. It's
brown.
Well, it's a brown room. Yes, you're right. And there's bright like Hollywood dressing room lights.
Yeah, it's pretty glamorous.
It's nice. It's nice and glamorous. And how did you feel on stage?
On stage, I was playing on the floor.
You were on the floor.
I felt glamorous.
Did you feel like you got your show across the way you wanted it to?
For the most part. Yeah. You know, it's a new record and it's new songs. They are new songs, and for me, like when I record songs, it's the first time that I've played them often.
Really?
And then most of the records are improvised.
Oh right.
Then to learn them, to put them across, I have to like go back, and sometimes I have to transpose them, or I have to like really work on them. And so playing them in front of people in the beginning stages is never comfortable.
Right.
But some of the songs I feel better, and then other ones I'm just like, well, here we go, jump off a cliff.
But on some level, do you not have more freedom if you've recorded an improvised piece and now you're bringing it to people? I mean, in some ways, some people would think, hey, there's no rules. You can do whatever you want. It's
true, and for some pieces that's true, and for other pieces they just don't work that way. You know, it's like some of the pieces require like a note by note redo from that specific improvisation, and other ones are like, oh, that was the feeling you were going for, go for that again.
Right. You're trying to go for that feeling. But I think we talked about this rather extensively the last time you were on the show, about how you and I seem to agree that we don't believe in the archive as the definitive version of a song.
Yes. No.
Like the recording, a record isn't anything. It's just a moment in time.
Exactly.
And so everything after that has no relation to that.
Yes.
Right. So you're still adhere to that.
I absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Living in the moment.
Living in the moment. They're not books. They're not written down, They're made and it's time-based.
Now, your last record had a conceptual framework. There was this invisible film, or not invisible. It was a film that exists in your head only.
Yes.
And it's the soundtrack and the score for the film that no one will ever see except for you, right? Right. Is there a concept to Cloud Corner per se?
No, there wasn't a concept for this one, and that felt good, although it also felt like a little bit of a free fall, because when you make something out of nothing, which is what sounds are,
yes,
you're just like, well, where's the boundary? You know, like I feel like with songs that have lyrics, there's by necessity of lyric, there's a structure. Yeah. And structure creates a boundary within which you work. You know, it's a framework. Instrumental music, when it's, more or less improvised, well, that can be anything.
Yes.
Literally anything. And so often I have created these frameworks in order to find, which sort of space I want to work. And in this one, I didn't do that. I did in terms of the sonics. I knew that I wanted it to be a lighter record sonically with, a lot more reverb, these like long decays of notes. I wanted the actual sounds to be kind of transparent, if we can talk visually about sound. Those were my starting points.
Okay.
But compositionally, nothing. I had no preconceived ideas about it.
And does this record, it sounds to me like it marks a departure. Are there other instruments on this record or anything?
There are. I play the guitar, and I play the requinto jarocho, which is a 4 and sometimes 5-stringed instrument from the state of Veracruz in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And I play the charango, which is Bolivian or an Andean really, but I got from a friend who went to Bolivia. I play the Wurlitzer electric piano on this record. I think those are the 4.
So you play everything.
Yeah,
it's still all you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Okay. But you didn't want to bring people in. Do you ever collaborate with people?
I have, and I do, and I will, but no.
Why is that exactly? Do you figure?
Well,
I mean, you're teaching yourself how to play these things, and I assume on some level.
Well, yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
I like to play with other people. When I make my records, I am way too much like I know exactly like this is right and this is not right, and I don't really want to either try to explain that, defend that, or compromise that. And I feel like it's just very much part of my process to build these songs in a just like an extremely intuitive and very personal way. Yeah. And then once they're made, I would be happy to bring in other people to sort of flesh out the performance of them. But the making of them is a totally solo endeavor.
I know you have this rebellious streak within you. You alluded to it on stage. You just alluded to it, right? Like you know what you want, and you know how you want it to be presented to people. Yeah. I can't remember. Did we ever talk about this? Do you have a sense of where that comes from? That sense of knowing yourself enough to know that what you want is ultimately what needs to go out there. Other people's external considerations, I suppose, aren't really something you're interested in as much.
That's a really good question. I've never thought about it, but what immediately came up for me as just you asked the question, and what came up for me was like being a queer kid. Yeah. Yeah. Like very early on, like I knew I was queer from when I was like 4 years old, and I grew up in the 70s. It wasn't like, there was no like in a small town, it was no positive spaces, and my early experiences were pretty traumatic.
You were in Sonoma, California at this time? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what came up for me when you asked the question is I learned early on to trust myself.
Trust yourself. You realized you had to be self-reliant?
And I realized that I was alone.
You felt alienated?
I realized I was alone.
You realized you were alone. Is that a better way of putting it? Okay.
Yeah.
You didn't feel alienated necessarily.
I don't know. I don't know.
You don't know. Yeah. Well, I bring it up because you have written at least one song and you talk about it. You talk about it on stage. You have this song about where you discuss this notion of alien. Yeah. And what it might mean. And when you say when you grew up, it meant someone from outer space, but it also meant illegal immigrants.
Or not necessarily illegal.
Oh, just immigrants generally.
Yeah, we use the word alien, right? Resident alien.
Yes, that's
my mother.
Right.
My mother is a resident alien.
Right. So just the way you bristled a little bit at that word when I said alienation just brought me back to that notion. You have a real conflict with that term.
I think there's a difference between a feeling of aloneness or a feeling of alienation, right? Like alienation is, I've been thinking about, and I can't remember if this was something I read or something that someone talked to me about, but I've been thinking a lot about the difference between invisible and unnoticed, right?
Oh, so yeah.
We talk about invisibility, like all these people are invisible, and in fact they're not. They're living full lives. Whoever, unnoticed. It puts the burden of perception right on the one who's not seeing rather than on the one who's not seen.
Not being seen.
And I feel like maybe the difference between Alone and Alien is there might be a similar distinction there.
That's a good point, yeah. And I appreciate the clarification there. That is a very good point. Okay. Well, we talked about the fact that the last record had this conceptual framework, and you say this new one doesn't. Do you have a sense of what might have inspired the music on Cloud Corner per se? Because I will say the last time we spoke, it was days after the American election, and we talked about where we thought things might go. It was so fresh after the election that we were still processing the result. At the time, in fact, the results were in dispute in a state-by-state case. Like, people were disputing votes and things like that. And as I recall, we were both in the midst of this despair, but ultimately ultimately hopeful. And so I bring this up because, and I think at the end of it, I said, do you know what you're going to do next? And you said you didn't know. But you seemed quite impacted by what was going on in your country. And so I wonder, going into this record, I imagine a lot of that is in there somewhere, maybe, but there's probably other things too. So that's why I bring it up.
I started recording this record in January of 2017. So Trump was sworn in late January 2017. And I started recording the record kind of before that. And so for sure, the sort of impending, what the fuck is going to happen, was there.
It was there.
It was there for sure. And also just a grief.
Yeah.
A deep grief for, how it turned out and how, in that moment, what my expectations,
That's how you started recording the record.
Yeah, I would say
in that mode.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the record was born of grief, but also, not wanting to succumb to that. And that grief is not pessimism.
No, I think there's resolve there too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sort of like stealing.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of the songs, and when I talk about them, on stage, it's like, this is about the long view. This is about the horizon. This is about, like, seeing past the day to day, because I think that's the moment that we're in.
Yeah, I wanted to check in with you among, other reasons. Like, I love talking about your music and whatnot, but just knowing how deeply impacted you were, and you're not alone in terms of your feeling there, obviously.
And in fact, I'm less impacted than many people that I care about.
Yeah. Yeah. So I kind of just wanted to see where you were at with it. You alluded to the fact that as you and I are speaking today, there were, 600 protests across? At least 600 protests involving hundreds of thousands of people in support of immigrant rights and against the Trump administration's policies and ICE and things like that. Was it hard for you to be away today?
Yeah, it's been a little, I've been really checking in on the Portland news because they've, shut down the ICE office in Portland for the last couple of weeks. And I went to the first day of that protest, and like there was just going to be a rally, and from that rally grew this occupation, which has now grown to be like hundreds of people, I think. And so, yeah, it's been hard to not be able to show up, but I also feel like everyone has a different role, and if I can say something on stage, or if I can say something, in this forum, like that's important to do. I have a platform, and I, appreciate that I get to speak.
So what kinds of things specifically are you saying on stage? I know people who hear this are going to see you, and that's fair, and I don't want you to divulge too much, but I'm just curious what the sentiments are that you're trying to express.
Well,
because
you just saw me play. So
I saw you play, and you alluded to the protest today, so I know about that.
And I talk about, the alien.
That's right.
Just disconnect with that word.
And you talk about when you played, was it Bread and Roses? Is that what you played?
I played Bread and Roses.
Yeah, you talked about the union.
I talked about,
workers' rights.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of this is still these are all things that you're alluding to, the fact that in some cases these things occurred 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But they still resonate today. They're still present today.
Yeah.
So what I know these are big questions, and I don't expect you to have easy answers, but like, as an American, like what's going on? Why don't you? And I mean, we're related to this too. Like, we're not learning from mistakes. I'm just curious.
Let me speak for all Americans.
Well, speak for yourself, because I think you're bringing these issues up.
Yeah, as an American, it's very interesting. I'm first generation. My mom is an immigrant. My dad is on one side he's from settler stock, and on the other side his grandfather was what we would now call an illegal alien. He jumped ship from the Norwegian army. So I come and my mom's family. My mom grew up. She's Dutch, and she grew up in Suriname. So she, as a was colonial. So she grew up in a colonial society, and then immigrated to the States. So as an American, right? Like I come from like every single part of what people talk about when they talk about as an American, right? Like a parent who's an immigrant, a parent who's a colonist, a parent who comes from like Oregon Trail, like so. And I think about that, and I think about, okay, well, my mom is like she's like one of the good immigrants, right? She's had no problem because of like all the obvious privileges, skin privilege and class privilege. And I think about sort of my own place in this really complicated story that we call the United States. And I don't think I can speak beyond just, like the exploration of those feelings and that identity within this context that's, sort of throwing garbage words around,
Well, I know you're something of a folklorist, if that's a term.
Oh, God, I don't think I'm educated enough to call myself that.
But you're interested in folklore.
Yes.
And you study it on some level.
Yeah, I like to read about it. I like to learn origins of songs, and I like to learn about how song stories connect to real events and or to each other, and how they change as they go along.
Well, you mentioned we were just talked about the protests today. Some of this music that we've just been alluding to was outspoken. In your study, do you have any sense of how much efficacy that kind of cultural work had on actual policies or movements? Do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm not sure I follow the question.
Well, there's this thing that has come into my field of vision where I feel like progressives are very good at putting forth really cool ideas in culture, in music, in film maybe, in poetry, and in journalism. But somehow these days I wonder how much efficacy that has when the people in power just ignore it. And they just have the power. Like I read a lot of news, and it always, even up to the election, I will say your election, it kind of felt like things were going to be okay. And then it wasn't okay. And ever since then, we've just constantly been teased with this notion of it will be okay because these guys are terrible people and they're not going to get away with this. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
And we talk about it, and some people sing about it and whatnot, but I'm starting to worry, I'm getting more anxious about it because we talked about this the last time too. We both live in bubbles.
Yeah.
And the people in power don't care about our bubbles. They
don't care about our bubbles, but the power in that is that they don't notice our bubbles. And that bubble can grow because it's unnoticed. And that's maybe goes back to that unnoticed, invisible thing.
Yeah.
Where something that is unnoticed can really grow underground. I was reading Rebecca Solnit earlier today, and she writes sometimes a lot about the Arab Spring. I think that's a really good example of something that was there. It was only invisible to the people in power. There was this vast, like, sort of potential energy that needed one or two events to just ignite something that transformed the world right now, and so I think in some ways it's not relevant whether the people in power notice or not. And in fact, when they don't notice, they actually hand over some of that power.
That's interesting. So if everyone were to descend on Washington
Everyone.
Everyone in the world, everyone in America who cared about this were to descend into Washington, let's just say, you think that would be a real impactful thing?
No, I don't. I think that at that point it would be like fucking Tiananmen Square.
Right. You can curse if you want.
I'm sorry, I don't know the rules in Canadian radio.
Well, it's not a radio, it's a podcast. So
good.
Yeah.
I forgot.
Yeah.
Like,
there's no rules. So there's no
good.
rules.
I kept
really.
thinking like, it's the 7 words I can't say. It's late,
if I broadcast this on my radio show version, I'll just
bleep it out.
I'll bleep it all out. Yeah.
No, I do think that if quote unquote everyone were to show up in Washington, there would be like some massive standoff that would end up super ugly. And I also don't think it's important to descend on Washington at all. I don't care about Washington.
The protests that occurred today were all over the country.
They were all over the country. Yeah. They were in little towns. There were 200 people showing up in like a rural town in a red state, you know?
Yeah.
And to me, that is so much more important, you know? I think we might have talked about this last time about local organizing.
We did. And you said, the places to really make your mark are at city council and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Local
and
level.
I still agree with that because it's on the like town, city, county, and state level that the legislative policies can be resisted by people who are in the whatever various versions of administration are, just because the federal administration is this one thing, the federal administration is only that, Yeah. They are, and I think there's all kinds of resistance, but in terms of like administrative or bureaucratic resistance, that needs to happen on the local level, and for that reason, small protests in small places make a bigger impact because that might turn the city council, which in turn might, enact a policy that, whatever. Washington, like, yeah, sure, it's great PR and it's like a morale boost, but no policy is going to change because however many people march in Washington. No, that's not going to change anything.
Right.
Which isn't to say don't go there.
But don't go to. You're not.
But
saying,
don't only do that.
Don't only go to protests. Actually, get involved on a political.
Everybody
level.
has a different thing that they can do. Some people, what they have is their body on the line.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to say who should do what.
Yeah. No, I hear you there as well. You travel around. Have you talked to people in different cities, like particularly like abroad, like when you're talking to Canadians about this?
Yeah, abroad people are just like, what you just said, what's going on? And like right after the Trump election, it was like, just like, what?
And so what do you say? What do you say when people ask you this? Like, I mean,
I kind of just agree. I'm just like, what is going on? Like, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We don't know. So how are you doing with it as just a person? I've talked to you about it as in terms of you being a performer and a musician, but how are you?
It's depressing, but I also live a nice life, and I try to balance these things, you know. It's overwhelming to like read the news every day, and I can't not read the news every day. Yeah.
Yeah. So have you written anything since Cloud Corner? Have you written anything?
I'm working on some stuff, but it's very embryonic. I have some like things kind of floating in my peripheral vision, but the focus really like has been on learning how to play the songs on this record for the tours that are coming. You
kind of said something similar to me when we would have spoken November of 2016, I think. And you're saying you went into the studio January 2017.
Yeah.
So you were but at the time when I was like, what's coming up? You're like, I don't really know. I got nothing.
Well, they're improvised records.
Right. They are. That's true. You didn't know. You didn't know what. And I think maybe I was actually asking you maybe conceptually, because you just, whenever someone makes anything to do with a movie, I always assume there's going to be a sequel.
Maybe I'll do a prequel.
So you've got some embryonic plans at the moment.
Yeah, they're not even plans. I just, it's kind of like, do you like to cook?
I love cooking.
So I don't know about if this happens to you, but for me, I like to cook. But sort of when you get inspired to cook, it's like you can kind of smell it and taste it before you even know what it is you're going to cook.
Yeah, you have a visceral
you just
kind of
kind
anticipation.
Get like I want that, and then you sort of realize what it is. It's more on that level.
Okay.
It's like, There's some smells and some tastes that I'm winding my way towards, but there's no meal or form or plan.
There's no plan. Okay.
No.
And you've got a lot of touring coming up?
I've got a fair amount of touring coming up,
Yeah.
so I guess that's the plan.
And where is it mostly in?
Well, so I'm in Toronto.
We're in Toronto today.
Today.
That's where we are. We're at the Transac. You're heading to Montreal tomorrow.
It's Montreal tomorrow, and
Yeah.
then down the East Coast for the next few weeks, and then back across the country, the U.S. And then I have a little West Coast run, U.S., and then Europe in September, and then blah, blah.
Okay. And are you excited to get to anywhere in particular? I don't actually know. I know you're kind of a West Coast person.
I am West Coast born and bred. West Coast, best coast.
Like, you got the California thing. You live in Portland. Like,
Yeah.
do you like other parts of the country? Like,
I love the Midwest, and
Yeah.
I love the South. I'm not always feeling that comfortable in the Northeast, to be perfectly honest.
in the Northeast.
Yeah,
Interesting.
of the continent.
Why
yeah.
is that?
I don't know. You tell me. It's different cultures.
The Northeast is different. What do you? Which parts of the Northeast are you specifically referring to?
I'm
Though?
not gonna.
You don't
want
wanna
to
say it.
talk
You
trash on
No,
places.
that's true. That's true. No,
I'm about to go there. But
I mean, does this count as the Northeast?
I don't think so. I
No.
feel this is a little bit more upper Midwesty.
Okay.
To me.
Okay. I
What do you think?
Well, I think of myself as I was saying this to a Vancouver person recently, a Vancouver guest, that I think of myself as a very East Coast person. I have trouble with the West. When I've been to Vancouver, like, I just don't feel comfortable there on some level. I like it well enough, but there's something about it. I don't know what it is. Like, I feel like maybe it's the weather, the climate. I have no idea. It's just a vibe. Are you talking about a vibe or just an actual way people are? Like, what do you mean?
I don't know. I can't separate.
You can't separate. Okay.
Yeah.
You're just not okay. But okay. I don't know why you flipped it to the negative. I'm saying, what are you looking forward to see?
Wait a minute.
Oh, you said the Midwest.
Yeah,
The Midwest. You did. I made it negative.
I don't think I was the one that did that.
I apologize. Okay, so you're going to go to the Midwest, and that'll be great.
I think I just came from the Midwest. No,
You
I'm
were
going to
just
go
in
down the East
Minneapolis,
Coast.
right.
And then I'll go like back. Yeah, I'll do a little bit of the Midwest. I'm going to be in the South. It's kind of like, the entire U.S. and Western Europe is on the docket at this point.
Yeah. One of the reasons I asked about the America stuff is just because it's a different. Every part of the country is different. Like,
Yeah.
we're in terms of what we were talking about politically as well.
Yeah.
So I
totally.
just wondered if. I know you talked about this the last time. Like, sometimes you are playing before an audience and they don't get what you're even saying.
It's true.
Like, they don't seem to get. They just love the show.
Yeah.
They don't see the political
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
overtones. They just whatever. They don't.
And people, I'm happy to meet people where they're at.
Yeah.
I don't need, I don't need everyone in my audience to agree with me.
Yeah.
I don't need to agree with everyone in my audience. I don't need them to like catch every reference or, that's not,
Well, I always appreciate speaking with you, and I like that you're open-minded but also resolute. Like, it's great. I'm just happy you came back here.
Yeah, thank you. It's
Yeah.
really nice to have another conversation with you. I was looking forward to it.
Oh, good.
So.
Good. Is there a song from Cloud Corner we can go out on? Like, is there something you can choose for us to play?
Oh, let me look at the track list.
Yeah, you should look
I
at
don't
it.
even know what's on this record anymore.
I can't remember either. It's new. It's so new.
Let's, I would say go out on Lift.
Lift?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the last song, and it's Lift in the sense of physics, like the force that causes something to rise off the ground.
Okay. And, the only other thing I forgot to mention, besides the song, it's on Thrill Jockey. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
You're on a great label.
Yeah, so far so good. I've been enjoying that.
So it's thrilljockey.com for more information, probably.
Probably.
It's the internet.
Yeah,
Thrill Jockey.
yeah.
Okay. All right. This is Lift by Marisa Anderson from the record Cloud Corner. Marisa, thank you so much for being back on the show.
Thank you, Vish.
It's nice
It
to
was
have you.
a pleasure.
Okay. Thanks once again to Marisa Anderson for making time to be on this, the 405th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available on all iOS and Android platforms and also Spotify and YouTube and Audio Boom too. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for, or if you want to learn more about me and sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com. You can like Creative Control on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at VishCreative, or follow me at Vishkhanna. You can also listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time around the world at CFRU.ca or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Also, please consider visiting patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going, and for your efforts, for your generosity, I can send you a t-shirt. I still have some t-shirts left for the show, so if you'd like some, I can send you one, and if you'd like something else, send me a note on Patreon, we'll work something out. Thanks again to the in-kind sponsors of this show, Pizza Trokadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, and Planet of Sound, who have locations in Toronto and Ottawa. Thanks to Jim Guthrie for letting me use the instrumental version of The Rest Is Yet to Come to end this show each week. Visit jimguthrie.org for more information about him and his work. And thanks again, finally, to you for listening to this program, reviewing it, rating it positively, downloading episodes of the show, and spreading the word about it to all of your friends. All of them. All of your friends. It means a great deal. And while I have you, I urge you to check out episode 296 of this show for the first time. Marisa Anderson was on because we had a very lovely chat, an extended chat about her background. So if you're just hearing about her for the first time and you want to learn more about her and where she came from, what she's about, if this piqued your interest, again, episode 296 of this show is a good place to start. And also check out her music online. Marisa Anderson. Unbelievable. Thank you, Marisa. All right, that's all I have to say. I will talk to you soon. Goodbye for now.